The hinge groaned again before settling into silence, a small victory earned in the pale wash of dawn. I wiped the grease from my hands, listening to the quiet hum of a house that never noticed who kept it intact. Most mornings were like this. In patching, adjusting, tightening little tasks that made the place look self-sufficient. They called it killing time. I called it staying useful in a home where usefulness was invisible. By the time the aroma of coffee reached the kitchen, my wife and her daughters had drifted downstairs, still half cocooned in the sleep of the young and self-important. I poured their cups, placed them on the table. The laughter started midway through. Breakfast light, careless cutting. Retired from doing nothing, the youngest said, her fork tapping against her plate like applause. My wife smiled without looking up, fingers busy with her screen. Their words hung in the air, mild and poisonous. I smiled back, the kind of smile that protects rather than agrees. Then the older daughter said, "At least you can keep the lights on." A joke to them, a sentence to me. I rinsed my cup beneath the tap and saw my reflection tremble in the stream. Outside, the sun was climbing behind the maple trees, gilding the tools I had lined along the fence. Maybe it was time, I thought, that they discovered what keeping the lights on truly meant. 8 years is long enough for roots to feel permanent, even if they were planted in borrowed soil. When I met Cynthia, I was 54 and still wearing my grief like a second skin. My first wife had passed after a long illness, leaving behind more silence than I knew how to live with. The house felt too big for one man. Every room echoed her absence. Cynthia appeared at a community fundraiser, floaty scarf, determined smile. 2 teen girls in tow who seemed to live on sarcasm and earphones. She asked me to carry a stack of folding chairs, then thanked me as if I had done something heroic. I remember thinking how odd it felt to be seen again, even briefly. Our marriage was a mutual pact against loneliness. She brought motion, I brought steadiness. She liked bright things. Garden parties, matching curtains, decorative lamps that used bulbs so delicate they blew out if you sneezed near them. I did not mind. It gave me reasons to keep my hands busy. I was the type to tighten bolts before they loosened, to check the fuse box for fun. She handled the social calendar, the smiling, the invitations. I handled everything that hummed, dripped, clicked, or leaked. Her girls were sharp, restless, and already half-grown when I entered the household. They tolerated me because I seemed harmless. Manual labor with manners, one of them called me once, not unkindly. Over time, that phrase hardened into a label. Still, I thought if I kept showing up rides to the train station, fixing the wobbly railing, tuning their first car, they might notice who was holding the edges together. But teenagers grow into adults who assume stability is ordinary, that hot water and headlights appear by magic. Years slid by easily. I paid the bill Cynthia found boring, the kind that required numbers instead of laughter. I drew up budgets and made sure the property taxes did not sneak up on us. Every corner of that house eventually carried proof of my habit: new wiring hiding under fresh paint, the roof patched so neatly it looked untouched, even the squeaky steps quietly retuned. Cynthia thanked me in passing, more often distracted than dismissive. I accepted it. Gratitude is not a requirement for love, I told myself, though I sometimes wondered when quiet service stopped being affection and started being camouflage. Evenings brought a comforting rhythm: television, home phone buzzes, online shopping, chatter, the heater kicking on just as the wind sharpened. I would sit on the porch mending something while snow dusted my sleeves and think, this is enough. Occasionally one of the girls would remember a need: the printer jammed, the bills auto renewed, the faucet sputtered. I would fix it, she would mutter thanks, and that was that. The kind of domestic peace that looks serene from the street but rusts slowly inside. Then came the small tremors: laughter at my expense, jokes about outdated habits, the strange reversal, where the man who built reliability became comic relief. I brushed it off. After all, they were family, even if they did not notice the scaffolding holding their comfort upright. One April afternoon, I sat at the dining table, surrounded by paperwork, utilities, credit cards, mortgage slips. I was not seeking trouble, I was double-checking due dates. Yet as I scanned each page, a quietly unsettling fact emerged every service. That breathed life into our home: water, heat, power, even the garbage collection stood solely under my name. Line after line, signature after signature. Their world ran on my quiet attention. I leaned back, watching the late light cross the bills like confession papers, and felt a weight grow inside me. Not anger, not pride, just awareness. That awareness did not fade. It waited patient as a seed for the moment it would matter. It started on a Saturday that felt too calm for what it became. Spring sunlight leaned through the window, the kind of gentle warmth that invites celebration. I suggested a small dinner that night, nothing extravagant, just roast chicken and a bottle from the cellar to mark a quiet milestone, the final payment on the mortgage. 10 years of shared bills, patched ceilings, fixed drains, a home completely ours. Cynthia barely looked up from her laptop. "That is nice, dear," she said, her voice caught somewhere between politeness and preoccupation. One of the girls settling on the couch asked, "Do we have to? We were thinking of getting away this weekend. Girls' time." I smiled, trying to soften the moment. "One evening together? A meal in our own house seems fitting." The younger one chuckled. "Here comes another one of your sentimental speeches." "Another old man lecture," the elder added, stretching the word old as if testing its strength. For a second I felt heat rise to my face. I had expected reluctance, I had not expected ridicule, a lecture one asked quietly. "I just thought we might celebrate paying off this place." They exchanged glances of shared amusement. Cynthia issued a diplomatic sigh. "Let them be," she said, closing her laptop. "They are young, they have plans." The younger daughter leaned over the armrest and said entirely too pleasantly, "No offense, but well, you do not really contribute anymore. Everything kind of runs itself now, does not it?" I remember the sound of my own breathing, steady, louder than usual. The clock ticked with exquisite precision. "Runs itself," I repeated, tasting the phrase as if it were something foreign. Her sister smirked. "See, he agrees." Something steady inside me shifted, not cracked, just moved. The feeling was not anger, it was something cleaner, clearer, like finally hearing an echo respond after years of speaking into quiet. I looked at Cynthia. She did not meet my eyes. Perhaps she thought silence would soften the edges of the insult, but silence has a way of amplifying truth. I finished my coffee and said only, "I see," before walking out to the porch. Behind me chairs scraped and voices faded into laughter. That evening I found I could not focus on television or the book left half open beside my bed. I turned the words they had used over and over, those sharp little syllables, "do not contribute, runs itself." They believed the pipes repaired themselves. The lights indulged in generosity, the roof defied gravity out of habit. I stared at the ceiling and wondered when reliability had become indistinguishable from uselessness. Sleep never came in full. Around 3 I got up, careful not to wake anyone. I brewed coffee and spread papers across the kitchen table. The silver under the lamplight reminded me of early mornings before work back in the years before retirement. Old habits die hard, so does dignity. I began to gather evidence not of accusation, but of existence: water bills, insurance notices, tax records, everything I had signed, renewed, or arranged. The folders formed neat stacks, each one murmuring the same story: my name always mine on the line beside responsible party. Every function of daily life tethered to me like invisible string. I moved through the house barefoot, pulling file drawers open with the same care I used when tightening screws. Even the small things: the Netflix account, the Wi-Fi router, the lawn service subscription, each trail led back to me. Their world ran itself because I was its quiet current. Outside, the first light began to smear the horizon pink. I looked out at the driveway where their cars sat idling on convenience built by someone they no longer saw. My reflection met me in the glass door, an ordinary man in an old robe holding proof of his own relevance. I almost laughed at how mundane truth looks printed on billing paper. I stacked the folders in careful order, labeling them not by company name but by function: water, power, life. Then I made another list, this one in a small notebook, every account to be closed, paused, or transferred. Asterisk. Not out of spite, but as a lesson written in experience rather than words. "They think things run themselves," I whispered, closing the notebook. "Maybe it is time to prove them right." The clock in the living room chimed 4 times, soft and measured. I tidied the table, turned off the lamp, and felt something like peace slip softly into the spaces where hurt had been. My plan was not destruction, it was demonstration. Soon they would see the shape of everything unseen. The house did not notice the change at first. That was part of my plan to make disappearance look like the natural order of things. The morning. After my quiet inventory, I started with the smallest of threads. The grocery deliveries, for instance, those boxes that appeared magically by the door every Thursday. I logged into the account, turned off auto-renewal, and watched the confirmation email fade from my inbox. A 6-second act that felt strangely intimate, like closing a conversation mid-sentence. The following days unfolded in measured increments. I retrieved my old toolbox from the shed, wiped dust from its handle, and placed it by the back door under the pretense of cleaning. No one asked why. I began moving pieces of my daily presents elsewhere, a jacket from the hallway, my fishing rods from the hooks, near the door the framed photograph of my late wife that I had kept discreetly on the mantel. Each removal left a tiny hollow in the landscape, a change small enough to be missed but large enough to loosen my attachment. Bills became my quiet partners in this strange rehearsal for vanishing. I contacted the utility companies, careful with my tone, polite as always. A temporary suspension, I said when they asked for a reason. Routine maintenance? The irony nearly made me smile. Electricity paused, internet paused, water scheduled for a meter reset. Every click of confirmation felt less like revenge and more like art, the composition of absence. In the evenings, I reviewed finances, shifting modest savings into a separate account no one else could access. I remembered the tiny lakeside cottage I had once used for short retreats, humble roof patched with tin but quiet. It had waited years for my return. I called its elderly owner and arranged a seasonal lease. He did not ask questions, our generation values discretion. As the days passed, the house began to echo differently. The ticking clock in the hallway, one I had repaired twice, stopped again. This time I left it silent. The garden edges started to brown where the sprinkler timer accidentally failed. The refrigerator's steady hum slowed after a routine inspection notice arranged by yours truly. Nothing dramatic, only enough to let entropy make its argument. At night I would sit by the window and listen to the faint shift of routine downstairs. The girls laughing, Cynthia on the phone, television light flickering across the walls. They did not suspect anything, and perhaps they would not until conditioned convenience began its slow crumble. Watching them in that unknowing peace, I felt a pang that was not guilt so much as sorrow for what I had allowed, a comfort built entirely on unseen labor. I wrote notes, not explanations, lists of small things they could have learned if they had wanted, to the trick to resetting the breaker, the schedule for trash collection, the password they never once remembered. It dawned on me that their confidence rested on my predictability. If love sometimes wears the face of utility, then withdrawal might be its truest mirror. By the third week, my preparations were complete. The cottage keys jingled in my pocket, a melody of second chances. I spent that final day tidying. I mowed the lawn one last time, trimmed the hedge, left the place neater than I had found it, as though paying respect to the years that had both sheltered and diminished me. Just before dusk, I walked the perimeter, touching the fences, the gutter, the mailbox, now tarnished with fingerprints from every season. It was not dramatic, it was maintenance closing loops. Inside I packed a small bag, few clothes, the photograph, the notebook of accounts. My wedding ring I left on the bathroom counter, not out of malice, but as a gentle punctuation mark at the end of a long sentence. Before leaving, I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, the same spot where the insult about keeping the lights on had been born. The room smelled faintly of coffee and lemon soap. I wrote a single note, folded twice, and set it on the table. No speeches, no reproach. Just one line in my neat handwriting: everything that runs itself will continue to do so. I locked the garage. With mechanical calm, stepped into the chilled twilight and listened to the house creak behind me, perhaps waking, perhaps still asleep, its silence more eloquent than anything I could have said. When I left, the world still worked for them. It took only a few days for the seams to show. Cynthia's first message arrived the next morning, brisk and annoyed. Did you forget to pay the electric bill? The lights keep flickering. 2 hours later. Another internet is down. The girls cannot log on. By evening the tone had sharpened. Why is there no hot water? What is going on? I read each one at the lakeside cottage sitting on the porch as sunlight trembled on the water. The quiet here was different, honest quiet earned. I made coffee on a small gas stove, sent no reply, and listened to loons calling across the reeds. By the second night, her messages had grown softer around the edges, frustration thinned into worry. Please call me when you can. The girls are upset. We do not know what is wrong. That afternoon, the phone rang again, the eldest daughter leaving a voicemail more anxious than angry. Everything is breaking. Mom says the power company cannot find our account. The landlord next door says maybe there is a system glitch. The phrase, system glitch, almost made me smile. There were many glitches when a house ran itself. After dusk, my phone buzzed a final time. This time their faces flickered across the screen, lit by the warm blur of candles. I accepted the video call. The background trembled with chaos, dishes, piled flashlight beams, darting the faint echo of the alarm system, beeping low battery. Cynthia, hair normally precise, hung loose around her face. Where are you? She demanded, though her voice betrayed exhaustion more than anger. At the cottage, I said simply. You just left? The younger one asked, voice hovering between disbelief and guilt. I thought you would manage, I answered. After all, you said everything runs itself? Silence, even the background noise flattened. The elder daughter eyes darted away, then back. We did not realize, she said, but the sentence drifted off, unwilling to find its ending. Cynthia tried to compose herself, folding her arms as though posture could give her authority. We should not have said those things. It was a joke. Jokes usually carry a bit of truth, I replied, not unkindly. Maybe it needed to surface. The younger one reached forward, candlelight dancing across her wrist. Cannot you come home? Mom has been on the phone with the power company all day. They cannot fix anything without your authorization. Everything is under your name. I know, I said. That was the idea, to show ownership not of the bills but of responsibility. When people think stability is automatic, sometimes they need a demonstration. Cynthia's eyes glistened. You are punishing us. No, I said softly. I am teaching balance. I do not want apologies, I want awareness. For a long moment none of them spoke. Their faces shifted in the glow, anger dissolving, confusion rearranging itself into comprehension. Eventually Cynthia sighed, the kind of sigh that releases years rather than hours. Love turned into routine, gratitude into assumption. I suppose that happens quietly, like everything else you do. Her words landed with the dull tenderness of truth recognized too late. Then the eldest daughter cleared her throat. There is something else, she said. My university emailed about tuition. The payment did not go through. They said whoever handled the account is not listed anymore. She hesitated. Was that you? Yes, I said. I wanted you to finish your degree without pressure. It seems I protected you so thoroughly, you never knew protection was there. The realization traveled across their faces like a shadow of lightning before rain. Cynthia covered her mouth. The younger whispered, Oh God, I did not gloat. There is no comfort in proving your worth when your worth should have been obvious all along. Cynthia's voice trembled. Will you come home? When respect lives there. Again I said, not the polite kind. The breathing kind, the kind that does not laugh when I speak. I can try, she said, and I believed her effort if not her certainty. The girls asked what they should do now. I gave them practical answers. Contact the companies, arrange new accounts, take responsibility. But beneath each instruction lay one unstated hope, that they would learn how much care hides inside ordinary maintenance. Before we hung up, I added quietly, I will think about returning. But the cottage stays. Everyone needs a place where silence tells the truth. They nodded, each subdued in her own way. Cynthia tried to smile and failed gracefully. We miss you, she said. I miss who we were supposed to be, I replied. Maybe we can still find that. Then the screen flickered, powered by a dying battery, and the image of my family dissolved into darkness. The line clicked off, leaving me surrounded by the lake-deep quiet. The wind stirred through the reeds, brushing the cabin walls like an old friend checking in. I set the phone down beside the dwindling flame of my lantern and listened. The silence did not feel empty anymore. It felt articulate, like a conversation finally understood. Sometimes I thought absence speaks the language presence never could. A full week passed before the crunch of tires on gravel broke the cottage hush. I was sitting on the porch, sanding an old wooden chair, when Cynthia Carr emerged through the pines. She stepped out with a grocery bag in one hand and something small, wrapped in cloth in the other. There was no dramatic entrance, no cascade of explanations, just the tired dignity of someone who has rehearsed sincerity and finally decided it does not need rehearsal. She placed the bag by my feet and unwrapped the object. It was the cracked family photo frame I had left behind, now mended so skillfully the join was barely visible. "I thought it deserved another chance," she said. We sat quietly, letting the lake fill the spaces words would have cluttered. I brewed coffee on the stove, poured 2 cups and handed her one. Her apology came softly unscripted. I did not realize silence could be this loud. I nodded. "It teaches its own lessons," I said. "I never wanted to hurt you, just to remind you what keeping things running really means." She swallowed, eyes glistening. "You did," she admitted. "Not the hurting part, the reminding." That almost made me smile. 2 days later, the girls arrived in a different sort of silence. Each carried an envelope awkwardly presented, like homework turned in late. The eldest offered hers first. "We pulled what we could," she said. "It is not everything you covered, but it is a start." Inside were checks marked for utilities and tuition. "I know," I said, letting the gesture stand. "It is not about repayment, it is about recognition." They nodded, faces pink with humility rather than shame. After they left, I walked along the shore until dusk, the waves stitching small sounds into the air. Their visit had not erased what happened, but it had redrawn the lines between expectation and awareness, between dependence and appreciation. I realized that to be taken for granted is not always a failure. It means you have given so steadily that others mistook the rhythm for permanence. The next morning I sat at my desk and reinstated the utilities, one call at a time. Service resumed. Each representative said, unaware their simple phrase carried the weight of reconciliation. I also mailed a typed sheet of instructions, account numbers, due dates, passwords, maps for shared responsibility. Coexistence, I wrote at the bottom, thrives on participation. A few evenings later, I returned home. The air inside felt freshly still, as if awaiting permission to breathe again. On the counter lay a handwritten note, "Thank you for everything we stopped noticing." Near the door I saw something new, the mailbox plate, once bearing only the family surname, now showed an additional line in Daniel. It was a modest engraving, imperfect but deliberate. I touched the metal cool beneath my fingers and felt the calm that follows stormlight. The clean, lingering clarity after noise has done its work. Months later, the house found its rhythm again, slower, steadier, wiser. The laughter that drifted from the kitchen no longer felt sharp, it carried warmth shaped by effort. Stepdaughters had both found jobs, modest ones, but enough to make them respect the hum of hard work. On weekends, they joined me in the garden sleeves, rolled shoes, muddied, teasing each other about crooked rows of beans. Their clumsiness made me smile, sincerity often does. I showed them how to turn the soil, how to read the clouds, how patience feeds growth better than sunlight alone. Cynthia would sit nearby pruning roses or brewing iced tea, and our conversations had changed to lighter, more truthful. She began using the word "we" when talking about the house. We should repaint the fence, we fixed the leak, small phrases that built quiet partnership. The old patterns of authority and assumption had unraveled, replaced by the give and take that healthy years require. I noticed their occasional glances of appreciation, but I did not crave them. Gratitude when forced is just decorum, when real it lives in gestures. So I let them keep their words and watch their actions instead. Each time they checked the thermostat, changed a filter, or paid a bill early, I felt a private satisfaction, a shared stewardship quietly maturing. One evening, as I adjusted the same kitchen hinge that had opened our story, I paused and listened. Laughter spilled through the rooms, familiar yet softened, no longer aimed at me but shared beside me. In that sound the house reclaimed its pulse. I thought then about how love and respect are like electricity, invisible until interrupted, vital only when connected. Sometimes you must sever the current just long enough for everyone to see the darkness, to understand what light costs and who provides it. Through absence, I had reintroduced value. Through patience, I had restored connection. I lingered by the hinge, feeling the cool metal beneath my thumb. The garden outside rustled with evening, the rooms behind me full of ordinary peace. And it came to me simple and final, the truth my silence had taught. I did not remove myself to punish them. I did it to remember what my presence was worth. Asterisk.